The giant silver ship hung in Earth's orbit like a shiny coin. It was the year 2157, and humans were not alone anymore. The Eldorians had come from a star system 30 light-years away. They were the first aliens to visit Earth. Alan Kent stood by the window in the United Nations building. His heart beat fast as he straightened his blue tie. As Earth's main diplomat, he would meet the aliens first. "Are you ready, Alan?" Susan Harris asked. She was his assistant and had helped plan for this day for months. "As ready as I'll ever be," Alan said with a small smile. The Eldorians landed their smaller ship on a large field outside. They looked almost like tall deer walking on two legs. They had soft fur in shades of gold and brown, large eyes on the sides of their heads, and delicate hands with 4 fingers. Their leader, who called himself Ambassador Thel, stepped forward carefully. "We greet you in peace," Alan said, using the words they had practiced. The Eldorian ambassador blinked his large eyes. Then something unexpected happened. When Ambassador Thel looked at Alan's face, he stepped back suddenly. The other Eldorians behind him made high-pitched sounds of alarm. "Is something wrong?" Susan whispered to Alan. The Eldorians talked quickly in their singing language before their ambassador turned back to Alan. "Your eyes," Thel said through their translator device. "They face forward." Alan was confused. "Yes." "And your teeth," Thel continued, his voice shaking. "You have pointed teeth at the corners of your mouth." Alan touched his canine teeth without thinking. "Yes, humans have different types of teeth for eating different foods." The Eldorians moved closer together, as if seeking safety in numbers. "You are predators," Thel said. It wasn't a question. The human delegation looked at each other in surprise. They hadn't expected this reaction. "We evolved from omnivores," Alan explained gently. "We eat plants and animals." The news seemed to make the Eldorians even more nervous. One of them whispered something that made the others gasp. Later that day, in a private meeting room, Alan and Susan tried to calm the aliens' fears. "Yes, humans have a history of hunting," Alan admitted, "but we've moved beyond that. We've built civilizations, art, music. We seek peace among the stars." Ambassador Thel's ears twitched. "In our history, across 12 known worlds, no predator species has ever achieved space travel. The killing instinct always turns them against each other before they can reach the stars." Susan stepped forward. "But that's just it. We're not just predators. We're complex. We nurture our young. We care for the sick. We protect the weak." "With weapons?" another Eldorian asked. "Sometimes," Alan said honestly, "but also with laws and compassion." The Eldorians seemed unconvinced. Over the next week, they studied human history with growing concern. They were shocked by wars, disturbed by violent sports, and unsettled by action movies. Despite their fears, the Eldorians eventually agreed to limited trade and diplomatic relations. Earth became a probationary member of the Galactic Confederation, but with warning labels. Other species were advised to approach humans with caution. "It's not fair," Susan complained as she watched the Eldorian ship prepare to leave. "They judge us by what we were, not what we've become." Alan watched the ship rise into the clouds. "We'll prove ourselves to them, Susan. It might take time, but they'll see there's more to humanity than our teeth and our eyes." Neither of them knew that in just 10 years, those very features the Eldorians feared would become the galaxy's greatest hope for survival. 10 years passed since first contact with the Eldorians. Earth had settled into its role as the odd member of the Galactic Confederation. Humans were kept at a distance, invited to few important meetings, and watched with careful eyes whenever they visited alien worlds. Commander Peter Walsh stood on the bridge of the Earth ship Horizon. His crew watched the main screen with worried faces. The video showed an alien city burning. Tall buildings fell as strange black ships flew overhead. "Play it again," Peter said. The video was short and blurry, but it was the third one they had seen this month. The attack was on Viridian Colony, said Laura Bennett, his communications officer. "It's the 5th peaceful world hit in 2 months." Peter rubbed his chin. And still no response from the Confederation. "They've sent observers," Laura said with a frown. "But no military action yet." Peter wasn't surprised. In 10 years working with alien species, he had learned that most evolved from prey animals. They had no instinct for fighting back. Their military ships were mostly for show, with captains who had never trained for real battle. Back on Earth, Susan Harris sat in a large meeting room at the United Nations. Now the head diplomat for alien relations, she listened as the Confederation ambassador spoke through his translator. "These creatures call themselves the Voidborn," the thin, blue-skinned alien said. His name was Zentar, from a world called Palos. "They appeared from uncharted space. They do not answer calls for peace." "What is the Confederation doing to stop them?" Susan asked. Zentar's skin changed to a lighter blue. "We are discussing options, many options." "While worlds burn," said General Rita Dawson, who sat beside Susan. "How many have died while you discuss?" "Violence is not our way," Zentar said. "We must find a peaceful solution." Rita stood up. "These Voidborn don't seem interested in peace. Earth can help. We have ships, soldiers." "No." Zentar's voice was suddenly loud. "The Confederation remembers human history. Your kind enjoys fighting too much. If we let humans join this conflict, you might never stop." After the meeting, Susan walked with Rita through the garden outside. "They're afraid of us," Susan said. "Still, after all these years." Rita looked up at the sky. "They should be more afraid of these Voidborn. At least we follow rules in war. These new aliens just destroy everything." That night, Peter Walsh was called to an emergency meeting. President Maria Gonzalez sat at the head of the table with Susan and other leaders. "The Confederation has rejected our help again," the president said. "But our ships near their space have sent back data about these Voidborn attacks. The pattern is clear." She touched a screen, and a map of stars appeared with red marks showing attacks. "They're moving in a straight line through Confederation space," Peter said, studying the map. "And that line points directly to Earth." Susan finished his thought. The president nodded. "The Confederation may not want our help, but we need to prepare. If these Voidborn keep coming, they'll reach our colonies in about 6 months, and Earth in a year." "What about the Aldorians?" Susan asked. "Their homeworld, Sanctuary, is directly in the path." "They still won't accept our warnings," the president said. "They believe their peaceful nature will protect them." Peter looked at the map again. "The Voidborn don't seem to care if you're peaceful or not. And the Aldorians have no real defenses." No one said what they were all thinking. The Aldorians were heading for disaster. And soon after, it would be humanity's turn to face the Voidborn. Unknown to all of them, the attack on Sanctuary had already begun. The sky above Sanctuary turned black with ships. The Aldorians had never seen anything like it. Their beautiful cities of curved glass and living trees had no walls, no defenses. Why would they need them? No species in the Confederation made war anymore. Lila Morgan watched in horror from the human embassy. As Earth's ambassador to the Aldorian homeworld, she had tried to warn them for weeks. Now it was too late. "Get everyone to the basement," she told her staff. "Move." Through the windows, she saw the first shots fired. Green beams cut through tall buildings. The Aldorians ran in panic, their side-facing eyes not even able to watch the danger, and their escape path at the same time. Lila grabbed the special communicator from her desk. It was only for emergencies, with a direct line to Earth that bypassed the Confederation network. She had never used it before. "This is Ambassador Morgan on Sanctuary," she said, her voice shaking. "The Voidborn are here. They're killing everyone. The Aldorians have no weapons, no shelters." She paused as the building shook. "They need help. We need help." The message would take hours to reach Earth. Lila wasn't sure they had hours. "Ambassador," called Sam Lewis, her security chief. We need to move to the safe room now. They rushed downstairs as the building trembled again. In the basement, 30 humans and a dozen Eldorians huddled together. The aliens were shaking, their eyes wide with fear. "Why are they doing this?" asked one Eldorian named Kelf. He had worked with the embassy for years. "We offered peace. We offered to share our world." "Some don't want to share," Lila said gently. "They want to take." On Earth, President Maria Gonzalez listened to Lila's message with a grim face. The room was silent when it ended. "How soon can we respond?" she asked. Admiral Frank Russo stepped forward. "The 7th Fleet is closest. 5 large ships, 20 smaller ones. They could reach Sanctuary in 3 days at emergency speed. The Confederation Council has not approved military action," said a thin man from the State Department. The president's eyes flashed. "Millions are dying. We don't have time for the council's debates." She stood up and looked at each person in the room. "I know the risks. If we send our ships, the Confederation might see it as humans looking for a fight. They might even kick us out. But I won't sit here while an entire planet dies, especially when we can help." She turned to the admiral. "Launch the 7th Fleet. Rescue mission only. No one gets left behind." Within hours, the massive ships of Earth's 7th Fleet broke orbit. Leading them was the Liberty with Admiral Russo on the bridge. "Set course for Sanctuary," he ordered. "Emergency speed." Meanwhile, on Sanctuary, the first day turned to night. The human embassy was one of the few buildings still standing in the capital city. The Voidborn ships landed, and strange soldiers in black armor marched through the streets. From the basement safe room, Lila and her team could hear screams outside. The embassy's power was gone. They sat in the dark, the Eldorians whimpering softly. "What happens now?" Sam asked quietly. "We wait," Lila said. "We hide, and we hope Earth got my message." She didn't tell them what she really feared, that even if Earth sent help, it would arrive too late. The Voidborn were moving through the city, building by building. It was only a matter of time before they reached the embassy. Outside, a new sound rose above the destruction. The Voidborn soldiers were speaking. Their language was harsh and sharp, nothing like the musical Eldorian tongue. They were getting closer. 3 days felt like forever. Lila Morgan and the others in the embassy basement took turns sleeping. The food and water were running low. Outside, the sounds of destruction had changed to an eerie quiet that was somehow worse. "They're still out there," Sam Lewis whispered after checking the security camera, "moving building to building, taking anything valuable." An Eldorian child whimpered in her mother's arms. The embassy staff had rescued a few families during the first attacks. "How much longer can we stay hidden?" Kelf asked. Before Lila could answer, a new sound came from above. A rumble that grew louder and louder. "More ships," someone said with fear. Sam checked his small screen again and suddenly smiled. "Not Voidborn ships. Look." He held up the screen. Through the grainy image, they saw ships unlike the black, sharp vessels of the Voidborn. These were sleek and silver with blue lights. "Earth ships," Lila said, her voice breaking with relief. "They got my message." High above Sanctuary, Captain Olivia Mitchell stood on the bridge of the rescue ship Mercy. 5 large ships and their escorts had arrived at the edge of the Eldorian system. The view on their screens showed the planet with black ships circling it like vultures. "They haven't noticed us yet," said her second-in-command, Jack Rivera. "We're still behind the moon." Admiral Frank Russo's voice came through the speakers from the fleet's command ship. "All vessels, prepare for Operation Lighthouse. Captain Mitchell, your Mercy will lead the first rescue wave. The rest of us will create a diversion." "Understood, Admiral," Olivia said. She turned to her crew. "Battle stations. Prepare all shuttles for ground rescue." The plan was simple but dangerous. While the main fleet engaged the Voidborn ships in orbit, the Mercy would slip through to the planet's surface with shuttles full of Marines. They would find survivors and bring them to safety. Sergeant Joe Carter checked his weapon one last time as the shuttle rocked through the atmosphere. 20 Marines sat with him, faces serious under their helmets. "Remember," he told them, "we're here to save lives. The Eldorians have never seen combat. They'll be scared of us almost as much as the enemy. Be gentle but firm." The shuttle landed hard in what used to be a park. Now it was just a flat area of ash and broken trees. Joe was first out the door, weapon ready. The city around them was mostly rubble. Fires still burned in some buildings. "Team 1 with me to the embassy," Joe ordered. "Team 2, secure this landing zone." They moved quickly through the streets. Twice they had to hide as Voidborn patrols passed. The aliens were tall, with 4 arms and heads that seemed too small for their bodies. They carried weapons that glowed green. At the embassy, Joe's team found the entrance blocked by rubble. "We'll have to dig through," he said. "Davis, watch our backs." It took 20 minutes to clear a path. Joe went in first, using his light to see in the dark building. "Hello," he called out. "United Earth Forces, we're here to help." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a door opened, and a woman appeared. "Ambassador Morgan?" Joe asked. "Sergeant," she said with a tired smile. "You have no idea how good it is to see you." Behind her, humans and Eldorians emerged from hiding. The aliens stared at Joe and his team with wide eyes, taking in their weapons and armor. "How many of you are there?" Joe asked. 42. 12 humans, the rest Eldorians, she replied. Joe spoke into his radio. "Base, we need transport for 42 from the embassy. Priority evacuation." Outside, the sky flashed with light. The battle in orbit had begun. Earth ships were engaging the Voidborn fleet. "We don't have much time," Joe told the ambassador. "The Admiral can only hold them off for so long." As they prepared to move out, an Eldorian approached Joe. It was Kelf. "You fight for us," he said in simple English. "Why?" "We feared you." Joe checked his weapon before answering. "Because that's what humans do. We protect those who can't protect themselves." Above Sanctuary, the space battle grew fierce. Admiral Frank Russo stood calmly on the bridge of the Liberty as explosions flashed across the view screen. "Third Squadron, protect our western flank," he ordered. "Don't let them circle behind us." The Voidborn ships were fast but clumsy in their attacks. They had never faced an enemy who fought back with skill. For years, they had only attacked worlds that couldn't defend themselves. "Sir, we've destroyed 6 enemy vessels," reported Lisa Green, his tactical officer. "But we've lost 2 of our own." The Admiral nodded grimly. Good people were dying out there, but they were saving thousands more. "The Mercy reports they've picked up 300 survivors so far," another officer said. "Tell them to hurry," Frank replied. "We can't hold this position forever." On the planet below, chaos reigned. Sergeant Joe Carter led his team through burning streets, guiding terrified Eldorians toward the waiting shuttles. The aliens moved slowly, unused to running or hiding. "Keep moving," Joe urged them. "We have 4 more blocks to go." A blast of green light hit the building next to them. Joe pushed the Eldorians down just as chunks of wall fell around them. "Voidborn patrol ahead," called Private Kim, who was at the front of their group. Joe crawled forward to look. 5 Voidborn soldiers blocked their path to the landing zone. The aliens were scanning buildings with strange devices. "We can't go around," Joe whispered. "Not enough time." He made a quick plan. Half his team would create a distraction while the other half led the civilians through. "On my signal," he said. 3, 2, 1. Now. The Marines opened fire from 2 directions. The Voidborn were caught by surprise. They had never encountered soldiers who used cover, who moved as teams, who thought ahead. 3 fell immediately. The other 2 fired back, their green weapons melting whatever they touched. In the confusion, the civilians ran past, guided by Private Kim. Joe provided covering fire until they were clear, then ordered his team to fall back. At the landing zone, Captain Olivia Mitchell supervised the loading of refugees onto shuttles. The Mercy could hold thousands, but getting everyone aboard was taking too long. "Captain," called her communications officer, "the Admiral says we have 30 minutes before they must retreat." Olivia looked at the hundreds of Eldorians still waiting. "Tell the ground teams to double time it. We're not leaving anyone behind." In orbit, the battle took a turn. Engineer Dwayne Patterson had been studying the void-borne weapon systems from the combat data. He noticed something important. "Admiral," he called from his station, "their shields drop for 2.3 seconds before they fire their main weapons." Frank understood immediately. All ships target enemy vessels just before they fire. Hit them in their moment of weakness. The human fleet adjusted their tactics. Suddenly, they were destroying void-borne ships faster than they lost their own. The enemy, confused by this new approach, began to pull back. On the planet, Dr. Nancy Klein worked frantically in the Mercy's medical bay. Humans with burns and broken bones lay next to Eldorians with similar injuries. More coming in, a nurse told her as another shuttle docked. Nancy moved to help an Eldorian child with a burned leg. The alien looked at her with wide, frightened eyes. "It's okay," Nancy said gently. "I'm going to help you." The child's mother watched in wonder. "You heal enemies too?" she asked in broken English. Nancy looked up in surprise. "You're not our enemies. Never were." In the command center, Lila Morgan worked with the ship's officers to coordinate rescues. She watched the screens as more shuttles arrived, each filled with survivors. An alert sounded. On the main screen, the void-borne fleet was regrouping, preparing for another attack. "We're out of time," someone said. But just then, Admiral Russo's voice came through. "The enemy is retreating. I repeat, the void-borne fleet is retreating from Sanctuary." A cheer went up around the room. They had done it. They had saved many, though not all. Sanctuary was in ruins, but its people would live. And the galaxy had just witnessed something new. Humans fighting not for conquest, but to protect others. 2 weeks after the Battle of Sanctuary, the Galactic Confederation called an emergency meeting. For the first time ever, humans were invited to sit at the main table. Susan Harris, now Earth's senior ambassador, took her place among the alien representatives. The large meeting hall was filled with species from 50 worlds. Many looked at Susan with new eyes, not with fear, but with something else, something that looked like hope. The head of the Confederation, a tall blue Zentari named Morrow, stood to speak. "We face a threat unlike any in our history," he said, his voice translated for all to hear. "The Voidborn have destroyed 7 worlds. Billions are dead or homeless." Images appeared on the big screen behind him. Burning cities, crying children, destroyed homes. For too long, we believed peace was enough. That violence was behind us. He paused and looked directly at Susan. "We were wrong." A murmur went through the room. The Confederation rarely admitted mistakes. The humans, whom we kept at arm's length, whom we feared because of their differences, are the only ones who have successfully fought the Voidborn. Ambassador Lila Morgan stood next to Susan. She had become famous across the galaxy for staying with the Eldorians during the attack. Now she spoke. "Earth doesn't want war," she said clearly. "We never did, but we understand something that the Confederation forgot over the centuries. Sometimes you must fight to protect peace." An Eldorian representative named Telva rose. Half his fur was burned away, and one eye was covered with a bandage. "My people would be extinct without the humans," he said simply. "Their ships came when all seemed lost. Their soldiers ran into danger to save strangers. Their doctors healed enemy and friend alike." He bowed his head to Susan. "We were wrong to fear you." The meeting continued for hours. Reports came in of more Voidborn attacks on outlying worlds. Scientists showed evidence that the enemy was building an even larger fleet. "They will not stop," warned Kevin Burns, a human cultural expert. The Voidborn believe all resources belong to them alone. They do not share. They do not compromise. The Confederation leaders looked troubled. Their societies had no concept of total war, no memory of fighting for survival. "What can we do?" asked the representative from Palos, a world that would likely be attacked next. General Barbara Ward, Earth's military advisor, stood up. "We can teach you," she said firmly, "not to be killers, but to be defenders." She showed plans for a joint defense force. Humans would train aliens in basic fighting skills. Ships would be redesigned with weapons. Colonies would build simple defenses. "You don't need to become like us," Barbara explained, "but you need to learn from us how to stand your ground, how to protect what you love." The vote was unanimous. For the first time in its history, the Confederation would create a real military, and Earth would lead it. After the meeting, Susan and Lila walked through the Confederation gardens. Crystal trees sparkled in the alien sunlight. "Everything will change now," Lila said quietly. Susan nodded. "Change isn't always bad. Sometimes it's necessary." An Aldorian child ran past them, playing a game with other alien children. Susan noticed they were pretending to be soldiers, pointing stick weapons and defending a small hill. Before the attacks, such a game would have horrified their parents. Now, the adults watched with sad understanding. "We're not teaching them to love violence," Susan said, seeing Lila's concerned look. "We're teaching them that sometimes standing by and doing nothing is worse." That night, as Susan prepared her report for Earth, news came in. The Voidborn had launched a massive attack on 3 worlds at once. The newly formed defense fleet had days to prepare. The real test was about to begin. 1 year after the fall of Sanctuary, a new fleet waited at the edge of known space. It was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Ships from 30 different worlds flew side by side with Earth vessels. Humans had spent months training alien crews who had never before raised a weapon. Admiral Frank Rousseau stood on the bridge of the Liberty, now the flagship of the United Defense Force. Beside him was Kelth, the Aldorian who had once hidden in the human embassy. Now he wore the uniform of a Confederation officer. "The Voidborn fleet is approaching," Kelth said, his voice steady. A year ago, he would have trembled at the thought of battle. "All ships, battle formation," Frank ordered. "Remember your training." Lieutenant Eric Barnes checked the systems on his small fighter ship. At 25, he was one of the youngest squad leaders in the fleet. His team included 2 humans and 3 aliens. They had trained together until they moved as one unit. "Ready, Trill?" he asked the Pelosian pilot next to him. "Ready," she replied. Her blue skin had turned a shade darker. Something Eric had learned meant she was focused. The Voidborn came in a massive wave. Their ships had grown larger, their weapons stronger, but they still fought the same way, with brute force and no real strategy. "They still don't understand what they're fighting," Frank said to Kelth. "They've never faced an enemy who learns." The battle erupted across space. Fighter ships darted between larger vessels. The Confederation fleet moved in patterns that confused the Voidborn, using tactics humans had perfected over centuries of their own conflicts. Eric's squad targeted enemy fighters, protecting the fleet's flanks. His ship rocked as energy blasts passed close by. "Squad 3, follow me," he called. "We've got leakers trying to hit the medical ship." 5 ships turned as one, chasing after 3 Voidborn vessels heading toward the unarmed medical ship. Eric pushed his engines to full speed, getting ahead of the enemy. On the main bridge, Admiral Rousseau watched the battle unfold. The Voidborn were strong, but fighting without thought or care. The Confederation ships took losses but held their formation. "Admiral," called Lisa Green, "their command ship is moving into firing position. They're targeting the Aldorian vessel." Frank saw it on the screen. The largest Voidborn ship was turning its main weapon toward an Aldorian cruiser that had fallen back with engine damage. "They're defenseless," Kelth said, his eyes wide. Eric Barnes saw it too. His squad had just destroyed the fighters threatening the medical ship when his scanner showed the massive energy buildup in the Voidborn command ship. "They can't get away in time," he said, mostly to himself. In that moment, Eric made a choice. The kind of choice humans had made throughout their history. The kind that the Confederation species were only beginning to understand. "Squad, protect the medical ship," he ordered. "I'm going for the command vessel." "Alone?" Trill asked, her voice shocked. "That's not the plan." "Plans change," Eric said simply. "See you on the other side." He turned his small fighter toward the massive Voidborn ship and pushed the engines beyond safety limits. The distance closed rapidly. On the Liberty, alarms sounded. "What is he doing?" Kelth asked as they watched Eric's ship race toward the enemy. "What humans do," Frank replied quietly. "Protecting others." Eric's ship slammed into the main weapon port of the Voidborn vessel just as it was firing. The resulting explosion tore through the command ship systems. Secondary explosions followed as the massive vessel broke apart. The Voidborn fleet, seeing their flagship destroyed, began to retreat. The battle wasn't over, but the tide had turned. 6 months later, representatives from all worlds gathered on a rebuilt section of Sanctuary. A monument stood in the central plaza, a simple stone column with names of those lost in what was now called the Voidborn War. Among them was Lieutenant Eric Barnes. An Aldorian child placed flowers at the base of the monument. She looked up at her mother. "He was human?" she asked. "Yes," her mother replied. "They all were, in a way. They taught us how to fight, but more importantly, they taught us why to fight." Nearby, Susan Harris stood with Ambassador Kelth, who now represented the Eldorians on the new Confederation Council. "We feared your teeth, your forward-facing eyes, your history of conflict," Kelth said. "We didn't understand that those same traits would save us all." Susan smiled sadly. "Being a predator doesn't make you a monster. What matters is what you choose to hunt." In the sky above, ships from 50 worlds patrolled in peace. Humans and aliens working side by side, guardians of a galaxy that had learned a hard lesson. Sometimes you need a predator to protect the flock.